Alrighty, folks, thanks for joining. Again, this is the AM breakout session. This is in regards to outreaching and fostering community trust. Before we get started, again, feel free, there's some snacks outside. The restroom's right in the front of the big ballroom that we just had left, so thank you again for coming. So I just wanted to start off with, we have a very wonderful panel here. We also have a panelist who's joining us remotely, so I do want to take some space to allow folks online to get settled and then really understand that there is a space for them as well. Yeah, and with that, is there any kind of quick comments, questions, concerns before we get started? Okay. Sounds good. So go ahead and get started. So for folks on Zoom, we do also offer simultaneous interpretation. Please click the globe icon. And we can get that started for you. And so with that, welcome to the big breakout room. Again, this is really about community trust and lessons learned for targeted outreach. And so before I really start off with this panel, I wanted to go ahead and establish a couple of ground rules first. Make space, take space. So for those that typically have taken up a lot of space, please step back and let those who haven't had an opportunity to speak or share their ideas to do so. This space is meant to be collaborative and understanding. And again, this is going to be, there may be some uncomfortable conversations happening, right? We do understand kind of current events and things like that, but we're here to really move the needle forward. And we really just want to come to a space of understanding and collaboration. And of course, as always, we've heard from board member Diane to always keep equity in mind. So that's really the goal of this breakout session, is really just to come to an understanding and kind of a lessons learned sort of panel. So that's kind of the theme that I was kind of going for here. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn on over to introductions. So my name is Tiffanni Nguyen. I'll be your moderator and facilitator for today. I am from the California Air Resources Board. I am the lead co-staff for the Driving Clean Assistance Program, as well as the Driving Clean Cars for All program. So I'll be like your go-to for both of those programs. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn on over to our panelists.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Adrian Gomez, and I'm the Senior Community Engagement Manager for the Driving Clean Assistance Program.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Claire Lyon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with Grid Alternatives, the Program Manager for the San Diego Clean Cars for All program.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is JJ Camarena, and I'm work for the Clean Cars for All program for the Bay Area Air District. I'm a staff specialist with the program, and I help get the gears going on the program. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So with that, we would just want to go ahead and kind of start. I'm very big on establishing a baseline, right? So some of these are kind of the baseline questions. Some of these are kind of ideas that I want to promote moving forward. Is, again, one, how do we define trust? A lot of folks have different ideas of what trust really looks like, right? There may be some folks that, hey, we just want to just go ahead and interact and engage. But what does that really mean? How do we measure trust? What does trust really look like? Trust takes a lot of different forms. So establishing a baseline really helps with that first. And so again, this really comes, and again, I really come from the CARB perspective. And so I'm coming from one end of the spectrum. But again, how do communities define trust? How can communities feel that we, as a government agency and or program administrator, can trust those that administer these incentives and administer these outreach events? Where can we come to a mutual understanding? And in the next couple of slides, you're going to see what we call a collaboration spectrum. So where can we meet on this spectrum and consider that as a success, right? And again, being quantitative and being data-driven, CARB as a data-driven agency, we want to make sure that there are baselines in where we can define, and can we define what trust means? Are there quantitative efforts that we can use to measure trust? What are those parameters and what do they look like? And will they evolve over time? So with that, we have what we call the collaboration spectrum. So this is a graphic that was brought up from the Tamarack Institute for Community Engagement up in the University of Waterloo in Canada. And this really, I think, does a really good job of kind of demonstrating what collaboration and trust really looks like. So a lot of times we don't really know, especially with outreach events, we don't really know, especially the communities that we particularly serve, right? That's one of the big goals, is especially for underserved communities, what are some of the needs that we need, right? What does need look like in these communities? Everywhere looks a little bit different, and I think that's one of the major perks of living in such a big state, was that everywhere from top to bottom, north to south, these groups are very diverse, and there's a lot of ways to measure collaboration, trust, and that sort of thing. So, but we all do know that trust is a work in progress. There's some things that we can move forward. There are efforts that we can use to move forward. And then there are efforts that we step back, and maybe perhaps a community may not have had like a certain way or a certain method of outreach, and then we find that that does not work for us. So I think this graphic does a really, really good job of kind of demonstrating the different buckets and the different ways of how trust and distrust can manifest, right? And so from the CARB perspective, we talk a lot about things like the funding plan, and we really do invite community members, NGOs, private citizens as well, to really come in and be involved. But also not just involvement, but where can we meet together at the collaboration spectrum, right? So again, this does a really good job. And we all have different goals, right? There are community members who want to be at the far right, at the fully integrate half of the spectrum, and there are some that may want to be at the cooperate part of the spectrum. So it's really a measure of trust, and again, it kind of goes back to that one question: how do we define trust, and where do communities define trust at? We really had to work with communities to meet them where they're at, and work with them to provide that baseline. Where can we go from there? And so I kind of want to go ahead and kind of do a little exercise with the group here. I kind of want to start again, and this is going back to the diversity of disadvantaged communities, the communities that we're working with and developing trust, right? So I kind of want to go ahead and start with a little exercise with you all. And I kind of want us to kind of think about what are some of the community members, community groups that you've worked with. And then maybe perhaps we can work through them. We can define a couple of characteristics of a community group. And then maybe we can work towards building a strategy, so that way we can get them from maybe coexistence to maybe collaborate. So that sound like a good exercise for us to work on? Sounds good. So I guess, Adrian, Claire, do you have want to kick us off with let's maybe like a community group, or like just maybe even like something like a placeholder? Like, what are some of the markers, I guess, for like a community group that may be at the coexist stage or something like that?
So like I guess, what are some of the attributes for organizations that are in the coexist stage?
Yes.
Is that? Yeah, I think, there's, in the work that we're doing, right, it's statewide, and there's already a lot of groups that are invested in their communities, right? And there really isn't that connection with them just yet. And so I think, some of the overlaps that I typically see is there is a real deep care for the communities that these organizations serve, right? And I think that's a really good launch pad to kind of move across the spectrum, right? I think, I think that overlap can lead to something like the communicate, kind of little section there, right? Where, we go to a partner and say, hey, we've done our research. We know the impact that you're doing. We know you care about the communities, right? We have this program. Let us fill you in and provide training. That way, we can essentially move to the cooperate stage, coordinate, collaborate, and essentially integrate. Because I think that really is the goal. I think and I'm willing to bet that everybody in this room cares about the communities that they serve, right? And so when we think about coexisting, right? We're in this big ecosystem, and I think that it starts with hey, we care about the same things, right? So how can we work together, right, to ensure that our communities are first and foremost being served, right? We're not leaving them behind, right? Especially like our rural communities, our Native American communities, right, that have been traditionally underserved. So yeah, like I think there's that overlap of just caring for the community. There's some of the issues that we're trying to solve. Some of those organizations are trying to solve as well. And really, it happens in a coalition, right? In kind of this space to be able to work together.
Yeah, I guess I would add on the spectrum, I kind of see it top down to bottom up. I think when we're competing, that's often we're given rules and regulations from the programs, and then they're coming down to the communities, and the community potentially had never put any input. And then we go to the other side of the spectrum, which is integrated, and I see that more as bottom up, where the communities are coming up with ideas that serve them, and then we're finding and matching funding that can really serve them. So I think on the integrate side, it's mutually beneficial for all the parties, the state, as well as the community, the CBOs, the individuals. And we're getting towards that. I think one example that I can think of is that Access Clean California network. I think that's towards the the right side of this spectrum, where we're actually able to bring all those folks into the same room, brainstorm ideas, talk about pain points in programs, as well as come up with solutions, and then have a space to share those back to the state. So. I mean, I hope that we're moving towards the right side, but there's definitely spaces that are being created, like the Access Network with all the CBOs, where we can have that safe space to share feedback on these programs that are in development or already existing.
Anything from you, JJ? So for our panelists, are there particular strategies that you use to help kind of move folks, like move CBOs in your relationship building along the spectrum? And I understand that a lot of CBOs may need different, resources and things. And are there certain key strategies that you feel like have been especially useful, or any sort of learnings that you've had as you move along in your relationship building with community groups and fostering that level of trust?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a work in progress. I think a lot of the discussion comes back to funding, and that we can't expect these CBOs to work on the issues at hand without having funding to support their staff and the development of these programs. Some of the CBOs potentially aren't already in the EV space or want to get into it because they see the need from the community, but there's that lack of knowledge or expertise, and so there's definitely the funding gap, and I think there is a space to collaborate, even outside of the programs. If there's not funding built into the programs for that, there's ways to collaborate outside. So we actually right now are exploring a TCC planning grant, so we're able to work with some CBOs. It was identified that there's a lot of lack of chargers in some of our priority communities in San Diego, and so we were actually able to go after some funding to do an assessment in those communities that hopefully leads to actual installations in the future. But right now, really working on engaging the community, and that was really built out of a successful partnership with some CBOs in San Diego, and just the need really. So I think being able to adapt and work with the CBOs as the needs arise is how we've been able to facilitate and collaborate and build that trust.
Yeah, I think, I love that. And I think the approach that we take with DCAP really is treating like our partner organizations exactly the same way we do with our communities, right? Every community is different. There's overlap, right, in demographics and geographical area. But, I always kind of use my hometown of Mendota You know, in small rural community, 99.9% Latinx, right? And the surrounding communities, Fireball, San Joaquin, Tranquility, same demographics, but the issues and what they face on a daily basis are very different. And so we take that approach with our partner organizations as well in order to be able to build that trust and be able to offer the support, right? And so, you know, we understand that not all partner organizations are the same. They may be, you know, serving, again, similar populations, but every organization is different. And they have, you know, and being able to understand those differences, you know, through more, you know, like intimate measures, right? One-on-one meetings, for example, on a recurring basis, right? We meet with CCV every 2 weeks. We meet with CCAC every 2 weeks, and you know, those meetings are really beneficial because we have it allows us to keep a finger on the pulse, right? And what we can do better as a program, because again, you know, we're a statewide program. You know, we kind of sit as an objective view, and our partners really are the ones that have a much better understanding of the communities that we're trying to serve. So being able to, again, just kind of get that feedback directly from these partners and the communities, by extension, I think is really beneficial. It is, you know, it's not rocket science, but it is a lot of work, right? And I think it's worth the investment though, because again, we're getting a clear understanding of what's going on the ground, right? And so I think for us, you know, I think the secret sauce really is, again, just having those intimate meetings with our partners to make sure that we understand them, you know, and you know, I go to, like, for example, with CCAC, you know, our meetings, we always, you know, there's always discussions about, hey, you know, we're experiencing this on the ground, or can we tweak some of these things to make sure that our partners or our community members have easier access to the program? And so that really is helpful, right? It's again, you know, I always kind of go back to it's not rocket science. It's just a lot of work, and I think, you know, what affects that sometimes could be like lack of investment, right, and outreach, and it kind of really makes things difficult. But that's one of the things that I really do appreciate about DCAP, and you know, that we are able to make that investment both in time and in, you know, funding to be able to support our partners, and really kind of have those conversations that again enable us to make tweaks to the program that'll make it easier for participants to access.
Thank you. So kind of going back to, come on, there we go. So knowing, like, now we have a little bit of background, right? Also, if there's folks online who want to contribute, please do give a quick shout. Not able to see any hands, so just as an FYI. But is there anybody in the audience that would also like to contribute to this conversation? What are some of the strategies that you found that have been really helpful, just working with some of the community groups that are very local to your organization? Are there any other strategies that you feel like are kind of not necessarily universal, but something that you found to be a very valuable tool or resource? Yes.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Rocha. I'm the Clean Mobility Outreach Manager for the Access Clean California team. And I just wanted to say yes to everything that the other panelists were saying. But also, like, I feel integration can only fully happen, not just when we're working with our communities, but we're fully invested and collaborators and their local aims, goals, and missions. And so something that's really worked for Access is that we have tailored scopes of work for each one of our outreach partners, and it allows them to do the work that they know works in their community. It allows them to pay for their community members to get their laundry cleaned while they talk about these incentive programs and other local incentive programs. It allows our community members to talk and uplift other community members that might not have access to certain resources but that would allow them to either get into a job that would be really meaningful to them. And so it's not just about, well, how can we adjust our programs, but it's also about collaborating with them and sort of being like a co-conspirator and addressing social issues, local social issues that continue to keep them down.
Thank you, Jasmine. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Diego Mesa, representing North Star Alliances. I'm just curious about what you just mentioned about the tailored scope of work. Obviously, I presume you're not referring to budget necessarily, but I'm wondering if you could just be a little bit more descriptive, if you mean like language for the CBOs, depending on the CBO, or if you mean training CBOs on just jargon, or what exactly do you mean by those tailored scope of works? I'll go over there.
When I say tailored scope of work, I mean tailored scope of work. We have one of our community partners right here, so I'm going to point them out, Healthy Active Streets. They do micromobility work in their community, and they teach their local community members how to safely navigate the streets in a very like extensive and personally, I think, like important way that really highlights like a person's safety before they ever make it onto the road. We have a community member that's in Pomona, and she works with local immigrant communities, people who might have permanent resident status, might have a green card, might not even be here legally, but they work with those community members, and they have cultural spaces for them, and we allow them, and we actually not even just allow, but we encourage them to continue to create those spaces and use our program as a way to uplift those community members and to have conversations with those community members that aren't just about the program, but are about what's actually happening there in that community, if that makes sense.
Okay. So on the perspective of logistics, does that mean that the CBO partner comes to you with their ideas for the scope of work and then you tailor based on that feedback? Is that how it plays out? I understand. Okay, thank you for that.
And if I may add, I think, that's, having tailored scopes of work, I think really allows for organizations to take on the work that is the most, how can I say this? That integrates with the work that they're already doing on a daily basis, right? And so I'm gonna shout out CCAC again, right? Some of the work that they're doing with the organizations that they're recruiting to do DCAP, there's a menu of services, right, that organizations can sign up to do, right? And so that comes with the, specific dollar amounts for the services that they're going to be, basically providing, with regards to outreach in the community. And so it really does allow for organizations to take on the work that makes the most sense for them. Because I think one of the things that, I typically say to partners is, we're not wanting to come in here and disrupt what you all have going on, but rather we want to be an additive to the things that you have going on, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, in addition to what everyone else been saying, also like to give more context on the tailored scope of work. I think something that has been really helpful with specifically Access Clean, since our organization does more work like very closely with like low to no income communities, unhoused populations, populations of people of color who might not have like green cards or access to like citizenship. So one of the things that you all have been mentioning that's a big help is consistency. So access to funding, access to having tailored scope of work is really important for us to be able to be consistent in the community, just because from our perspective on the ground, that's something that has been really like crucial for connecting people with these resources. Is like, that's how we build trust, is letting them know that the resource is there and that it won't just be taken away randomly one day. So through like Access, we've been able to help run a program called Laundry Love, where we help people pay for their laundry once a month for 2 hours. And we've been helping a lot of victims of the fires recently who have lost their homes, who maybe might need access to transportation. So we're able to directly connect them with those kinds of resources that would help get them access to transportation through like rebates and things like that. So I just wanted to uplift that consistency is also another big part of trust, especially for communities who have historically not had these resources. It's really important that the resources maintain funding, just because it becomes like a staple. As we've seen, like we've been doing the Laundry Love for a year now in Long Beach, and it just keeps growing because people in the community talk to each other, and now they trust us as like a member or like a resource, So we get a lot of people coming back, a lot of people reaching out. Consistency is a big part of that, and that kind of goes into what everyone mentioned earlier.
Hi, can I add? Sorry, I was having technical difficulties earlier, but so with the Clean Cars for All program that we run, what's key is an open platform, open level of communication from everybody from across the board to voice their concern, voice their maybe the criticism or a problem that they may be experiencing and dealing with that issue right away. Yeah, the program has really evolved for the past 5-6 years, really from being it has gotten simpler. A lot of the language has been changed, mostly from community input, from people who will say maybe something needs to be simplified, and hearing concerns from the public, not only at outreach events, and how to make things better, and hearing feedback from our dealerships network on how we can make things better for our participants to understand what they're getting themselves into, I think has allowed the program to evolve. And not only that, but just having a quick response, being there, readily available, has with that open communication really has allowed us to go from the communicative state to more of a collaborative, integrated state, right? Our dealership network has, a lot of their issues have been addressed, and they see that, and they gain trust. Like I had, for example, one of our dealerships reach out to me because they were going to do a presentation on all the incentives out there, and they, because of that open communication and and they're having their concerns addressed, they have that confidence, and that they're comfortable to be able to reach out to you for help whenever necessary. So that demonstrates trust, having that open level of communication early on, being open to feedback at all levels, and being able to address those concerns first, in a timely manner, has allowed the program to evolve and become better to serve the community and for our stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Again, this is not meant, it was meant to be much more interactive, much more collaborative. So it's really just, again, an informal conversation about how we continue to develop this. So at least for me, the key takeaways now is just consistency, right? Consistency in not just funding, but human capital, right? Making sure that the same folks are coming out, people are recognizing them, getting that word of mouth out, making sure that information is consistent across the board, very just uniform, and things like that. And again, just really, meeting folks where they're at, making sure that they are supported in their efforts. And really, I believe that we all share the same goals, right? It's just, it manifests, we have different needs, and there's different resources that are needed to kind of help bridge these gaps and develop that kind of trust and that kind of relationship building, right? And so now we're going to kind of go ahead and go back to a little bit more of a traditional kind of panel. And so these are some of the guiding questions that I kind of wanted to go ahead and pose to not just the panelists, but to you all as well. So some of the community groups, what has been and who has historically been underrepresented, been left out of this conversation? How can they be included? Why are they not included? How can we help bring them into the fold? And then how do we measure those gaps, right? I know that a lot of times, a lot of these gaps stem from historical kind of origins. And so kind of thinking about those and being kind of mindful, and how can we kind of proactively strategize to bring them into the fold. And so what are some of those strategies, right? So we're looking from kind of an A through Z kind of strategy, and just thinking about how can we bring in those folks in. So I guess I kind of want to go ahead and kick it off with our panelists first. So what are some of the community groups that have been underrepresented in the programs that you have ministered? And kind of going through that, like what were some of the learnings, what were some of the processes, and kind of how did you measure and bridge those gaps?
I can kick us off. We talked about it in the last panel that there are, our low-income folks, our BIPOC communities. I would call out our elderly and senior populations as well, as well as, non-native English speakers or immigrant groups as well. I think each group is somewhat, underrepresented in different ways. I think speaking to some of our elderly and senior populations, a lot of it has to do with technology, whether that's the technology that we're trying to promote in those communities, or just the technology to even access them from the get-go. And so I think, maybe jumping a little bit ahead, but for that group, we have been really trying to have a more in-person presence for our program. So, we do have an office in San Diego, and I think, we're a newer program, and we were pretty surprised to see how often folks want to come and see us in person. They drop by our office quite a bit. And I think whether that's for folks who maybe English isn't their first language, they actually really enjoy having the face-to-face. It's easier to communicate. Or for the elderly seniors, and we can bring out our iPads for them and help them through the process, maybe give them a paper application. So I think, really trying to tailor the needs where we're hearing from them, and just trying to have that presence. I think people more and more want to have that in-person connection. And the theme of this is trust, and I think having face-to-face contact does build that trust over time. And so we've been really trying to lean into that, and have that benefit those underrepresented groups in the program.
I co-sign on all of that as well. But I think one of the things that we're doing is we're really leaning on our partners, because again, I go back to that, that thought, right, that our partners understand the communities much more than we could hope to understand them, right? We're serving the whole state. So, I think for us to try to understand what all the gaps are, what communities are being missed, it really is pretty close to impossible, right? And so, Macau Comité Cívico del Valle got Agustin here, and I'm really grateful for partners like CCV, right, who are consistently reminding us, right, that, hey, there's a lack, of access to tech, right? Folks may not understand the vehicles. There's a lack of access to charging infrastructure. There's all these things, all these gaps, right, that communities are facing, right, to be able to take advantage of, incentive programs or being able to just get what they need to have a better life. And so I think, one thing I'll say is that when certain populations are underrepresented or not engaged, I don't think it's something that folks do on purpose. I think that it's just, the need is so wide, and the gaps are so nuanced across all the different communities, right? That it really does take having that communication and building that trust, both with our partners and by extension the communities that we're trying to serve. I just think that again, being able to measure the gaps really takes, consistent communication with the folks that are doing the work on the ground. And so that's what we really lean into, right? We really lean on our partners to be able to say, hey, this isn't working, right? There aren't charging stations in Imperial Valley, or there aren't enough, right? Or, hey, we're working with a Native American community where there's no access to, Wi-Fi or any sort of, way for folks to be able to access, some of to be able to access the resources that are available to them. So I think, it's important to build the trust with the organizations that we partner up with, because again, they just have a much better understanding of those gaps, what folks, are being underrepresented, and really being able to craft, some strategies together that are community relevant, right, and also community sensitive.
Yeah, thank you. And just to add to that, it for us as working on the Clean Cars for All program, we really try to make strides to target AB 617 communities of color, disadvantaged communities where pollution really has been detrimental in that community. And our platform has been open. We actively seek diverse stakeholder input, and with a special emphasis on prioritizing, marginalized voices, non-English speaking voices, and try to be inclusive in where we obtain this feedback. We actively try to go to outreach events where in these locations. That's a critical component of our policy, and try to see what could be any barriers to enrollment and participation into the program. So I think that's critical. I think going where they are, and trying to seek a diverse set of voices, not just those, not just across the spectrum, right? Across income levels, across you know, diverse backgrounds, for example. And in the program, we can identify gaps, right? We have data where, at the end of the month or on a quarterly basis, because participants add in, whether they're African American, Vietnamese, Latin American, we can tell at the end of the day, okay, what areas, what populations are not being fully representative in the data, right? And we've identified those gaps, and we've tried to take measures on that. For example, like we know that the Latin American community is not represented well. I mean, in terms of the general makeup of the Bay Area, right? We have roughly 7% Latin American participation versus, Asian or white that are in the double digits. And we've tried to contract with other agencies. For example, El Timpano. El Timpano is a local news organization that helps or delivers. It's like a nonprofit or community-driven news organizations that targets Latin American and Mayan-speaking immigrants of the Bay Area. They have over the years they've been a reputable source of information for this group. What's important is they have a large text message subscriber base, which we have utilized to send messages to this community that would otherwise not know about the program, right? And so they get these text messages about the program in very catchy phrases and very positive language, for example. And we also, and in turn, they also get to respond back and provide feedback. They provide, hey, I've submitted this application, and so we're able to connect with them and help them along the way. We also our case managers, thanks to Grid Alternatives, shout out to them. They provide support in all different languages as well. So that's so there's people who apply, they're be able to feel safe and feel comfortable to go through the process in a language that's their own, right? We've also have contracted with La Raza, a Spanish music station here in the Bay Area, and we've done several iterations of broadcasting 30-second minute ads in Spanish, for example. Last year, there was I think it was successful. There was roughly like a 95% LTR or listen through rate. So this indicates that people were listening through the message through the whole way, not just hearing half of the message. And so we were able to reach over 80,000 listeners. So that's been successful. We've identified gaps, and we've taken measures essentially to try to bridge that gap, right, based on the data. And it's anecdotal. There's not really hard data to tell us that this has been successful, right? But anecdotally, we can say, okay, it seems to be working, and we plan to keep continuing in that format. Thank you.
Thank you. So just doing a quick time check. I know that we're kind of excited for lunch. I know I am too. It's like 12:10 that we're due out for lunch. So it's 11:46, 11:45. So I want to go ahead and just kind of start comments, questions, concerns, and just have an open discussion, open floor discussion, Q&A kind of thing for now. So I guess if anybody has any comments, questions, concerns, feel free, and we can go ahead and get that going. See a hand here, we see a hand here. Yeah.
Hello, Linda Kamushian with Grid Alternatives. I just wanted to comment that trust is a feeling. It's not something you can measure quantitatively, so I just want to outline that, and this is why we work really closely with community-based organizations and others at the ground level, because that feeling exists with folks that they serve, and it has to be established, right? It's something that it has to exist, and then there has to be accountability so that it can be maintained. You know, it's not just like, okay, we did this event and therefore trust now exists with this community, right? It has to really look at the whole picture and how to, like you said, and people have shared, meet people where they're at. So in the context of designing programs, funding nonprofits at the local level, if you want trust as an outcome, and something that can at least be qualified, I wouldn't say quantified, I would say qualified, there has to be the understanding that it is a feeling. And and human beings, we're all humans that have feelings, like if that is broken by, say, not meeting the open application date that you've said repeatedly and it keeps getting pushed back, for example, or there isn't paper applications or a place to go to talk to someone because you're getting a phone call line that you can't reach somebody and actually have your questions met, or people are not responding. Like, these are the things that deteriorate the trust, and we have to have that accountability as folks that implement, as folks that set policies, as funders, that it's the feeling that people have when it comes to approaching these programs. And if you're going to make a financial investment in a car, and you're going to have that title, and you're going to have that insurance and that responsibility, that's a big undertaking. For example, for cars, that's only one transportation, but we have to really identify, like, what are we asking people to do here? And how do we really meet the need of that feeling by reiterating that within the program that we're designing? So just wanted to add that it's like, trust is a feeling.
Got it. Thank you. I think there was somebody here in the front.
Is that on? Okay. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Maria Reese. I'm with the Central California Asthma Collaborative. Is it possible to go back to those questions of lessons learned? So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is I've been going to various CARB events through my last 4 to 5 years of doing this work, and we've been having the same conversations of who is underrepresented. It's always the same answers. As somebody who belongs to that population, it's like, I know that I'm in an underrepresented community, and it's like, we know. And we need to we're having the same conversations year after year when it comes to serving the communities that we reflect. So how can they be included? I think it goes beyond even the programs and beyond just getting an EV incentive into their hands. There are so many factors that play, just even getting them into the program itself. So my team provides one-on-one services online and in person to residents that want to apply for the EV incentives. Has anyone in this room actually made an ID.me account through the IRS portal? Okay. Did you have to do the 360 face scan with your phone? Okay. So imagine trying to explain that to somebody who, number one, does not speak English, and number two, does not have a smartphone. How do we get them to that point? If they file taxes, they have to provide their tax transcript for the incentive program, right? So even getting them to that point, it goes beyond things that the state program can do. This is more like, I call my team like green social workers, because we go beyond that. We have created a guide just to let people know how to even get their tax transcript, because they can't get that. Some of the residents have said, like, I've never made an email account, I don't know how to make one. We made a Gmail guide where they could make an email address before, without having a prior email. So it's like, it goes, unfortunately, it goes beyond, like, we know who is underrepresented, but it goes even deeper than that. It's like more, it's like even a smaller population within the communities that we serve. It's just this access of technology. They don't have a smartphone, do we connect them with those booths that have like the government phones? Like, what is the next step there? Like, we know who is underrepresented, but how do we get them the social services that they actually need? Do we partner with social services? What is the gap? The gap is technology. It's financial education, which the cool thing about DCAP is, like, they get assigned to a financial counselor, and they basically walk them through the entire process of their lifespan, quote unquote, of the grant approval process. Like, they get that financial counseling, which before has not been done. In the underrepresented communities, like, financial education is more of a luxury, because we are so focused on just surviving. And, we don't have the luxury of thriving and being able to put aside money for a new vehicle when we're trying to figure out, like, where the next meal is going to come from. So the gap goes beyond just like programs. It's just social. So, like, how do we bridge that? And I believe, honestly, is just more direct contact. Like, teams, administrators, we need to be doing more one-on-one contact. It's not, oh, we have one office here, like, everybody has to travel here. Like, we need to have like a tour. Like, there needs to be like a U-Haul with laptops and iPads going from county to county, setting up shop similar to the way that Valley Can does, and helping residents do their applications, where they can come out with their folder, provide their documents, like, actually do it. And then, how is trust maintained? It's delivering on what is promised. We, as the faces of community-based organizations, like, we have to build the trust to even get residents to trust us. So anytime that we promise something, we have to deliver. So that does not just fall back on us, but it also falls back on, like, the Air Resources Board, right? Like, if they're saying, like, we're going to provide this, and we tell the community that, similar to, like, dates in the past, in past programs that were supposed to open and they didn't open. It's also, like, being transparent. So we don't have all the answers. And I think that's some of what our community members are grateful for, is that we try to be transparent and was like, hey, unfortunately, we don't have the answer. We don't want to appear like we have all the answers, because we're trying to figure it. We're all trying to figure it out currently. Like, especially like with this administration and tariffs affecting, like, vehicle prices. There's a lot of uncertainty. So yeah, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Can I add, just to follow up on this lady who said, who just spoke? I think, having very clear and very transparent instructions on how to apply in multiple languages is very important and key to get people to be able to successfully apply to these programs. And not only that, it's just, we've come across, people, sections of the populations, like the elderly, who are not very techno savvy. There are telephones there and we provide, access to that and make it transparent. And so, in order to reach case managers who have the tool set, have the wherewithal to help this segment of the population. So it all begins in just making everything very clear, very easy to understand. That's been, key to our success. And also, yes, when agencies fulfill their obligations, I think that builds trust. But you guys also have heard, I'm sure, of the phrase, sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think that, that it essentially means transparency and openness. and accountability straightforward. If there's a problem, if there's deadlines are not being met, project deliverables are not being met, being transparent about that in itself builds trust, right? Say, hey, I couldn't, install all these charging stations in this, at this community center because of COVID, because funding was taken away, and being transparent, being accountable to that, I think builds that trust. And having an open loop, feedback loop to make things better. I think that's key to all in all for trust to continue to be maintained. Thanks.
Sorry, Jasmine again. Wanted to make one other comment. Something that feels like an elephant in the room to me that I don't necessarily know if it feels like an elephant in the room in other folks is that we don't talk enough about Black people in these spaces. There's not enough Black people in this room to address the underwhelming and under uptake of that specific community in these programs. There's not enough Black people on our panels to compensate for the fact that we are not addressing that community in any meaningful way. There's been times where they've even been left off of the demographics in these spaces. And so I think that's something that we really need to confront as well. To this person at CCAC's point, yes, this is a conversation that we keep having every year without any meaningful work and effort. And I also think yes, we can ask our community members to let us know what we're doing, but we also have eyes and we can reflect. And one of the ways that I think Access has done that is we've taken on at least 3 organizations that have Black leadership and have then primarily work with Black folks in order to address that very large gap that we see from that community. That definitely needs to be worked on. And so, yeah, just calling that out.
Anyone online? Any questions, comments, feedback?
Well, I just wanted to add, the lady who just spoke. I agree with you. There's not enough African American representation, especially in our program, and I think I tie that to a lack of trust, right? And that's something that is built with time, and that we're trying to reinforce and trying to make inroads and trying to do more outreach events and get CBOs involved. But it's difficult because of prior events or past events. That trust is broken and it needs to be fixed. It's the African American community. We would like to have them confide in us and have the confidence that we're gonna have their back, right? And maybe that's missing there. And this is a good opportunity for those that maybe provide input on how we can bridge that gap with the African American community, because that's something that we would like to grow upon. And your feedback is very welcome here.
Hi, my name is Maria Cortez. I work with the City Heights Development Corporation with transportation and planning. First of all, I want to say to the lady that spoke earlier that yes, it's the same old thing over and over and over again that we keep hearing. I've been coming to the CARB presentations in City Heights or in San Diego, and I just want to say that, yes, we do need more African American input. We need trust from them. But I also want you to know that we at the City Heights Development Corporation have that. We have grown and we reach out to the African American and also Asian and everybody. And we've built trust. And the way you build trust is by you going out, reaching to them, but not only just reaching out to them, inviting them to meetings, and also inviting your politicians to come. And for those that don't show up, we know who they are, and they know the community knows who they are. We've been dealing with a lot of issues in San Diego, in City Heights, because we are an underrepresented community. But I want to say we are being representative now. We're getting out of being under. Why? Because of transparency. And when you show people that you are truthful and that you are working with them, yes, not everything's going to get done, but let them know when it doesn't get done and why it doesn't get done and why it's taking so long. And that's where you're going to build trust with the community and reaching out to them. Because not only when the politicians don't show up, like your mayors or your council members or whatever don't show up, yes, Sandag, Caltrans, same thing, MTS, same thing. But guess what? They are coming out now because why? We don't go away. They get tired of seeing our faces. They get tired of hearing us. But yet we are out there. And that's why I want to say that's where you need to build the trust with the community, because then people will start coming to you. And we're all in this together. And not only that, but also the youth. Get the youth involved, because they are the strong voices too. Even though us senior citizens, yes, we are there too.
Okay. Can we go ahead and unmute?
Hello, my name is Brielle Washington with Grid Alternatives for the Access Clean California. And I just wanted to thank my colleague Jasmine for bringing up this topic and being an advocate, because as African-American woman, it's definitely something that I notice, and it's something that is hard to not notice. I lead the technical assistance and capacity building program for Access, and I intentionally sought organizations that are Black, BIPOC led, Black and Brown led, who have Black and Brown leadership for this reason. And just for them to know that, there is someone who reflects their community that can help them with this incentive programs and help them navigate through this space. And I know they say this brings up every year, but just looking at this is like maybe the second or third event, and there's been no African-American people speaking panels at all. And so it's just something that it definitely needs to be addressed, and maybe intentionally next year find someone who is Black or Brown, African-American, to be on the panels, to speak, to let people know that, we're not invisible, that we do have a voice, that we do matter, because it's kind of like there's a lot of non-Black people talking about the issues of Black people. And it's like, how do you really know how we feel if you're not one of us? And as African-American, we have a very mistrust. We have a history of mistrust in the government. Just if you think about Tuskegee, if you think about just slavery, civil rights, you can just go on forever about why African Americans do not trust government or American policies at all. And so for us to hear, these talking heads that don't look like us telling us, oh yeah, go buy an EV, do this. It's like, yeah, is this another scheme trap? So I definitely think that it should be intentional next year that there is a Black person speaking on the panel.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Perez, I mentioned earlier that I'm the renewable energy developer. Hi, Tiffany. We work together with the Native American Energy Services Company. I like the comment that was online just now. I'll piggyback off of that, because it's intentional to make sure that everybody is at the table. In addition to being a renewable energy developer, I also worked at the state under Governor Brown and Newsom at the California Veterans Department, and it coincidentally was the Office of Underserved Veterans. So everything is intentional what you do to making sure everybody is invited to the table and building that table and making sure that we're there. And I would say one of the biggest things that just drives me nuts, and it happens so much today, drives me nuts, is that somebody non-native or Latino, whatever, and they're speaking on behalf of us. We exist, we're out there, we're professionals, we're working throughout the field, and even I'll take it a step further, that we're from California. You know, why bring in somebody else from the, outside the state when we're right here? And I just don't understand that. That's at the state level and also public sector as well. So just stop.
Thank you for that comment. Let's see here. We're almost at time. So I just want to provide any last minute kind of closing before we head over to closing remarks. But any other contributions to this conversation? It's been a very open and a very candid conversation, which I really appreciate. I think this is the forum to do so. And so, yeah, last call.
Thanks. Rashid, CHDC, also black, you might have noticed. Other people didn't notice that before I had my locks, but anyway. I think a lot of great stuff has been said here. One, I wanted to speak to what the lady who was just speaking to about, we do that a lot, speaking on behalf of people, and I think that's an important part of it too, giving people the opportunity to speak on behalf of themselves. And I also definitely wanted to thank Jasmine for what you said about, just the underrepresentation of black people kind of in a ton of spaces. I mean, I think an interesting thing is, and this is not to say that it's not still a problem, but looking around here, like I see more black people than a lot of spaces that I've been in, especially in the private sector. But that all kind of aside, I also just wanted to mention that I really appreciated what the lady from CCAC said about, the access issue. I love the idea of, getting a van on the road to give people the opportunity to apply to these programs, right? Because, I think the gap is not just a knowledge gap, but also an access gap and also kind of a privilege gap, right? Because when I say a knowledge gap, it's not a knowledge gap through any failing or lack of the people who have that lack of knowledge. Like, it's that, society or whatever has not served them and has not given them access to that knowledge. And, a lot of us have the privilege to have technological knowledge, financial knowledge, whatever, and that's something that something like a paper application can help with, but you really do need to get out there and meet people where they are, right? Like, for example, with our application, even if you have a paper application, you still need to find a way to upload your ID, right? And that still speaks to the access gap. Are you going to take a picture with your phone? How do you print that? Are you going to get access to a scanner, right? And so something like, really getting out there on the road, I used to work at a community benefit organization where, you assume it's like kind of a technological lack of knowledge thing, but we had a brick and mortar office, right? And that's not something you can do when you have a statewide program, especially in some of these more remote areas. I mean, Adrian could tell you we'd probably need hundreds of offices to do something like that. And so, yeah, just wanted to double down on the idea that we need to kind of think outside of stuff like that, and how do we, really meet people where they are and reach them and help them with these things.
Thank you for all the discussion. We're doing great on time. So again, some last closing remarks. This has been a great and open, candid discussion. We have a lot to take back for next year's development of the symposium as well. But again, continue these conversations. I think like how someone had mentioned, trust is a feeling. Trust is something that we continue to build. Trust is something that we continue to invest in. And so I think that a lot of these conversations, going back to the conversation that we just had about, it seems like we're going nowhere, but I think it's again to continue to emphasize that we are here. We are people here. We are voices here. We're not just discombobulated voices in the ether. We are people. We have an identity. And so I think that, as we continue to kind of roll these programs out, these are, especially in these current times right now, trust is more than, important, right? Is probably first and foremost for a lot of these community members that have been left out of these conversations and now they want to come in and, be a part. We all have the same goals. I think one of the things that I've talked about, and in my personal experience, is that we may disagree in terms of political ideas and things like that. But the everyday person, we all share the same problems. We may have different communities, but we all do share similar kind of problems and things like that. And so I think we all have a similar goal in mind. And so again, thank you again for this open and candid conversation. We have a lot to take back. I hope you enjoy the rest of the symposium. And that's it for me. Anything else from the panelists?
Thank you all, honestly, for just speaking up about, some of the things that are still, the things that need to be improved on, right? And I think, that's exactly what we need to hear, right? Because I think, yes, we talk about it all the time. And I think part of taking action is working again with the folks that are speaking up, right? And saying, hey, this is what's happening in our community. This is what's being missed. We need to have more folks at the table. So I really do appreciate, hearing everyone's perspectives and really raising the issues, that are going to be important to ensure that there's an equitable transition, in, for example, to cleaner vehicles, right? I think, there's a timeline that we have, I think it's 2035 or something like that. But if we're not involving folks that are traditionally missed, it's all for moot, really.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. And thanks for everyone's perspective. And I hope to connect with some of you after this so that we can continue the conversation and bring some of the good ideas like the shared, bus. I love that. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
GJ?
Just one thing, I just wanted to add that, trust is a meaningful connection. It's a bond, right, between two people, two entities. That with time, it gets stronger, and where there's confidence that one will selflessly act in the best interest of another. So I hope that we can get there one day, and build that trust and build stronger connections. And a lot of the feedback that everybody provided will be taken seriously, and I thank you for providing that feedback. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone.